Good afternoon and or good morning, depending on where you're located, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Educators AI Playbook. My name is Mark Orchison, and I'm Dan, joined by with Dan and Julia. Good afternoon to you both. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Good to be with you both.
Yeah, and Julia, looking you good?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Nice to see you both again.
Fantastic. So we've got a packed session today. We start off with Dan taking us through what happened at Google I/O. We'll talk about a case study of ours that Dan's been working out with one of Julia's colleagues, Katie at St. Julian's in Portugal. Really, sort of, Dan, I'm really interested to know when we go into that one around how they are treating AI as a digital integration project from your perspective. Touch upon your new product or your new platform, which is the Educator AI tools, which is a fantastic resource that we'll sort of go through in more detail. And then we're going to sort of raise the discussion around governance and a concept that we call the diamond formation when it comes to integrating AI in a responsible and ethical way while achieving your academic goals. So we'll talk about that. The Diamond Sprint, which is a new PD program that Dan and I are running, and then sort of forecast what is happening with AI for the next 12 months or what we expect to see over the summer. While also within all of that, discussing from a Julia context what we're seeing with vendors, how vendors are integrating AI into their contracts, into their transparency agreements, how the EU AI Act coming into force, and well, another level coming into the force, may change some of the things that schools are going to be seeing around contracts and transparency agreements over the next couple of months. Um, as always, if you have any questions, please ping them in chat, and we'll sort of answer them as we go through. But Dan, over to you. Google I/O. You were out in San Francisco. What happened? What can you tell us? What's interesting and what's sort of not what we don't need to be concerned about, I suppose.
Yeah, it's really for the second year running. Big thanks to Google because they fly me out and get to experience Google I/O. Which no, if no one's ever heard of Google I/O, it was always kind of the big developer conference from Google, so where they bring developers around the world. Normally based around Android, but it's changed very much over the last 2 or 3 years. So it's become kind of the Google AI annual event. Even so, they kind of dealt with all their Android updates a week earlier. It's something called the Android Show, which they've just kind of invented. So it really is kind of the Gemini festival. And I say festival because they do it down at the shoreline in Mountain View in Silicon Valley at a shoreline theater, which is like an amphitheater with surrounded by all the Google headquarters. And it feels like if anyone's ever been to a Google office and kind of the reputation they've got for being quite playful and free food and all of that, it's kind of that in a festival. So it's pretty impressive. It's really cool place to be at. You kind of feel like you're at the coolest place in the world when you're there. And they use it as an opportunity to announce what they're working on in terms of their AI tools and their new AI capabilities. So you get a mix of kind of all the Google teams coming out and saying, right, we've got this new product and so on. But and then you also get Demis Hassabis, who's just won the a Nobel Prize, who runs Google DeepMind, who kind of one of the most advanced AI labs in the world. So he comes on and does a bit of I suppose a bit of what they're working on, I suppose, in big sky thinking, maybe a bit of I don't know. Tell you why I'm hesitating here because he used a phrase where he said we're in the foothills of the singularity, and that kind of took me back a bit because anyone who knows
Mm.
anything about what we mean by the singularity in AI is kind of yeah. I think hyperbole is probably the great the kind way to put that. If he's true, then that's quite amazing. But yeah, so a lot of exaggeration around these AI tools. What's really fascinating is I don't know how you find this, but anytime Google brings anything out, they have to find a name for it. So you get
Mm.
all these names thrown at you, Omni, Flow, like all these brand new names. And
I feel
if
like
any
they need a dictionary of Google just to keep track of what's going on.
yeah, yeah, you can imagine like them maybe having this department somewhere that thinks of all these new names, and they're just, I imagine they're overrun off their feet at the minute. Like they're just literally. But if anything, if last year's I/O is anything to go by, half, if not more, of these products we'll never hear of them ever again. Really, it's
Right.
kind of like they're throwing a lot at the wall at the moment, which is exciting because a lot of companies are doing that at the moment and seeing what will stick with AI, almost trying to find a use case for AI, which kind of feels like the wrong way around. Which so there's a lot of to be cautious about as educators, a lot to be excited about, I think, in terms of where the general trend of where the technology is going in terms of the capability. But it's a real chance to get to see a cutting edge tech company who's creating its own frontier AI just kind of go, this is what we think is working, or what might work, or what you might want as a consumer. They don't get it right, but if they throw 50 things at the wall, which, to be honest, I think it's probably more than 50 within a 2-hour keynote, if one or two of them sticks, then it's obviously great for them and maybe good for us as educational consumers of this technology as well. So we had updates to Gemini. Gemini is a big favorite among educators around the world. Most schools use Google Workspace for education, so Gemini is the natural choice for them when it comes to an AI chatbot and those functionalities. Also, some functionalities built into that, like video creation, and then more of the agentic stuff. I know we've talked about agentic technology on the webinars before. In terms of how I like to think of agentic AI is, a lot of us, I think, are familiar with AI where we type into it, we get a response, kind of a bit like a vending machine, do this for me, get this back. Agentic AI is more setting off your AI on a larger project and allowing it to make decisions on its own along the way and use other technology. So it might use an app, it might use a browser on its own. And we're seeing that type of technology really take off this year. Google getting on that train very much so, and introducing Google Spark, I think it was called, which is still not yet available, but is kind of their answer to background running AI agents. But I get quite excited about it because I know a lot of schools use Workspace. I use Workspace, and I think an AI agent, if it then utilizes and is embedded within that ecosystem and can guarantee some of the securities that you get from being within an ecosystem, I think it's quite exciting for those who are running their organizations and schools within that product ecosystem. But yeah, we wait to be impressed by that technology because we don't have access to it yet.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. A couple of points there that you touched upon. The first one is like sticking to the wall, stuff sticking to the wall. Now, as you know, Dan, like at Nine, we are running with AI in terms of integrating AI into our products. So where we see AI within the Nine platform is being able to improve the productivity of people using the platform. So very much, okay, if an EdTech vendor's privacy notice changes, or their sub-processor list changes, or there's something that's changed around the feature set within their product, like our platform should be able to raise that to you and say, over the past week, there are 5 of your EdTech platforms have changed, and therefore that's going to influence your current privacy notice that you push out to your students or to your teachers, or it's going to require your DPIA to do, and then it should suggest to you, for example, the changes, and you go yes, no. So you've always got a human in the loop. And there's an interesting thing that we're seeing at the moment. So as we're sort of going through the architectural development, there's a risk that when we're building out our AI, first of all, that we need to make sure we have humans in the loop to make sure that through the code development, because we will be using AI for code development, there's a human to review that, security testing into production, and then pushing out from the feature set. But as if you don't architect it in the right way, and this is a long way sort of going around to get to the point, if you don't architect it in the right way, as more and more people start using your platform with AI into it, your token volume increases, your costs increase. And I see quite a high level of risk that we have all of these EdTech vendors that are coming out, and many of them are all on your new platform, the Educator AI tools that will come onto. But there seems to me that within the sort of like the gold rush for AI, lots of products come to the market, but there doesn't seem to me much thought about the economics behind how they're going to generate money. So as more and more people in more and more schools are using their products, it becomes they start losing money because they haven't actually licensed the product all the right way, or they'll start putting restrictions on how you can be using your products, how they can, sorry, fair usage policies. And in a way, I'm sort of forecasting that in 3 years' time, you're going to see like half of the AI, even less of the AI vendors that you're currently seeing, because the economics of it aren't going to be working about it around the architecture. And I'm sort of wondering whether first of all you're seeing any of that, or whether you feel, going back to the point of like lots of your schools are already within a Google ecosystem, coming out of a Google ecosystem and taking a chance on a newbie whose economics around their product may not have been worked out. Is that a risk? And is it a risk worth taking at the moment, or is it a risk worth pausing and focusing on the current mainstream products around Google or Office 365 that you currently may be using?
Yeah, I think like going back to someone like a Google, they I think they've got the capability to throw things against the wall.
Yeah.
There's an expectation on a company like that, not just to be useful,
Mm-hmm.
but also to be pushing the boundaries, and within a certain yeah, to a certain degree. Because, and I think Silicon Valley's always kind of had this attitude of whereas I think most companies around the world are like, how can we solve a problem and help people where they're at? I
Mm.
think Silicon Valley's always kind of had this almost like semi-god complex where it's like, actually no, we should be showing people what they should be doing and how to what their
Yeah.
life needs to look like with this technology, rather than how do we fit into it. I think education, although I'm a big fan of innovating and saying how can we renew things and do things in new ways, I think a lot of the benefits are, well, how does this actually help us where we're at right now? And I think that's where and to be fair, that's where a lot of these newer companies who are utilizing AI are kind of where they're at. um and you see the tools like create a lesson plan with an AI, create a
Mm.
set of questions with an AI. So they're kind of at that level. I do think though, for those who have kind of been in since the dawn of ChatGPT and are into their third, fourth year of operating right now, they are now trying to scramble to think of new ways of doing things. So
Mm.
so now those types of tools are starting to think about how do we integrate agents for teachers and more ecosystems, because first of all, they've got massive investors now, and not all of them do. Some of them are still kind of bootstrapping themselves, but the biggest ones out there have all taken massive investment. And at some point in the very near future, those companies are going to want to return on that investment. They're going to want to see
Mm.
some money coming back. So there's a massive pressure on those edtech companies to really, really get out in front. And so you're kind of seeing the same pressure that you'd see on like a Google or a Microsoft on these smaller companies. And so we see them getting into that territory of, oh well, let us try and show you how you should work with AI rather than how
Mm.
AI can fix a problem. And I think to come on to the other point you made, Mark, which is actually, if you are not a Google or an OpenAI who are creating the these frontier models, then you're very reactive to how they set their prices for their API modeling, because as I'm
Yeah.
sure many will know, in order for them to have a technology like an AI, they have to pay an OpenAI or a Google through something called an API to use that technology.
Mm.
Google then up their prices, at OpenAI or Anthropic up their prices, and then they're subject to those price increases as well, which they're going to have to pass on to the user, the educator, the school eventually. Now, I think what we're finding at the minute is because that is happening, the prices are going up. I think probably most notably Anthropic have put a lot of their prices up recently because they've got to pay back their investors and they know they've got a captive audience.
Mm.
Is then the API for their AI gets passed on to now that third party company, that edtech company utilizing that. And I think we're seeing the edtech companies kind of swallow a bit of that cost at the moment because they don't want to just pass it straight on to educators and frighten educators and and scare off potential customers. But I think you're right. I think there's something in there where I think in the not so distant future, they're probably going to have to start passing on those increased costs to the customer, which is us, the educators, the schools,
Yeah.
using this technology. So then do the school go, right, actually, we're already paying for Gemini, we're already paying for Google, or a Copilot and Microsoft, whatever it is, ecosystem. So we'll just fall back onto that. I think we are starting to see a lot of schools doing that already.
Yeah.
Mainly because they provide more security and less risk, which I know Julia will be all over in a second. And because of those extra risks now as well. Now, that's not to say all of them are doing that. Some of these tools are still very, very popular because they're quite good and they're helping a lot of teachers out there. But like you imply, there's so much nuance and complexity there.
Interesting. Like when we're thinking about, okay, what the value proposition of how we're integrating AI into our products, you've got two flat things. You've got the first flat thing, which is the architecture of the platform, the value that you're deriving at the moment. Then you've got the value that you derive from the productivity through in having AI like woven into the product. And obviously, the more that you use the AI, there's a greater cost to, for example, us in terms of licensing. And like we are having like dialogue internally within the business in terms of how do you attribute that value to that specific cost, and how do you make it fair and transparent so the schools who are then purchasing an AI enabled product are receiving the value that they're paying for, the schools that are then suddenly using it a lot, or bigger schools fairly have a fair share of that cost. And I can foresee a time in the near future where the cost that you're paying as a school for your EdTech products, outside of your like Gemini or Google or your Microsoft or whatever it may be, is that you have a baseline license cost, but then you have variable costs based upon the value that you're deriving. And I think there's going to be an impact on school budgets in terms of how schools need a budget for the consumption that they, or the value that they are deriving through the AI products. And I can see the dialogue or the conversations or the starting point in terms of where value is received, moving from the EdTech provider to the school, where historically it's been, I'm the EdTech provider, here's my license cost, to the school saying, in actual fact, yes, we see value your product, but actually the productivity gains we're going to, that are going to be created to us. So, this is where it's going to be, and that's the cost that we're going to pay for. So I think I can sort of see a change in that. And going on to your point there about more schools playing around with being able to build their own platforms within AI. Within Gemini, there's what's called Gemini. My brain forget is the studio, AI studio.
AI studio.
Yeah, AI studio. And like Julia, like we're seeing this, like we're seeing tech directors, I'm saying tech directors, people within schools, could be anyone within schools, creating their own versions of a product or coming up with an idea to build their own product. And there's a really interesting point here, because it can create a lot of value for schools, because in terms of creating it, there's going to be a consumption cost at some point, but in a way, there's quite a lot of risks that you're taking in doing that. Is that what, Julia, right? So could you just talk us through what you're seeing with some schools and the sort of risks that are being, I suppose, being transferred from an EdTech vendor to a school by doing so?
Yeah,
just before you jump in, we're talking about vibe coding here, aren't we? There's a lot of
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we are seeing kind of, like you said, Mark, like quite often IT directors, but also it might just be someone who's really kind of technologically competent, who's taken it upon themselves to say, actually, we cannot find a product in the landscape that does all of these things exactly how we do it at this school. And so I'm going to go and use kind of vibe coding tools, go to AI and build one myself. It's made it so much more accessible, right? So and then what's happening is we've got these tools that are very, very custom made. They tailor made for exactly what the school needs, which is fantastic. But then all those risks that your vendor takes on are now being taken on by you individually as a school, or in some cases that individual who works at the school is going off and doing it in their own time, and that individual is becoming a vendor. So then, like Mark was saying about us doing our own security testing and our penetration testing and things like that, like you're taking on all of that responsibility when you do that. And then you're also, all those checks that we talk about doing on your vendors, you're going to have to do that on that product that you've created. You're going to have to do that on with the person who's created it if they're sitting outside of the school. So where you're creating something that's extremely bespoke and might be very, very efficient for you, you're taking on a huge amount of risk, but you're also taking on a huge amount of cost as well. So doing that security testing, doing the vulnerability scanning, making sure that you have all those measures in place and procedures, and you have someone with overview of that tool governing that tool. These are the things that you sign an agreement, make sure the contract's doing, the vendor's doing that, bish bash bosh, great. But if there's no vendor, who's doing it? Who's making sure that that tool is secure? And imagine if you did build a tool using AI and it had a data breach, how are you going to explain that to your community and your families and your staff and all those kinds of things? So there's a huge amount of risk that you take on when you do create this, obviously massive benefit as well, but it's a lot of risk that the school, or even in some cases the individual, is taking on themselves. So there's, as always with a lot of these things, there's a lot to consider.
Yeah, there's a lot to gain there, isn't there, Dan? I mean, you'll be working with schools down that are building vibe coding different products for different subjects, or I think your project momentum is around solving a problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was wondering before. Can I ask Julie, when also, like, let's say you do pull up like Base 44 or Lovable or Replit or whatever it is, and you create your own platform in there, and you who owns the IP on that? Like, is there detail in there that says, actually, okay, you're creating this for your school, but actually, do you even own that product?
It's definitely something, definitely something that you need to look into, because I imagine it differs with different platforms. But it'll be in their T's and C's that you agree to when you kind of start using the product. So definitely something for schools to consider if they're building out those things in terms of IP as well. Yeah, because you might not own it when you use those
therefore
tools.
The data you're putting into it as well.
Potentially, yeah, exactly. And like where, if you are building on these platforms, like I was looking at Google AI Studio as well, and if you are building on these platforms, who's processing that information, and where's it going, and who's it being shared with, and all those other things. So it's a kind of Russian doll effect of suppliers and processors.
Yeah, I think we've just scared everyone off.
I know. That was not the purpose of it. I think it's more of there was one other fact, like we are seeing like some schools are doing this, but then offering out that what they have built to other schools. And so, I think that you're sort of amplifying the problem then. I think if you're watching is just to be concerned, or just be aware of what the risks are that
Mark, I suppose, when we talk about AI writing, we talk about AI, like anything we produce with AI, and you said it before, having that human in the loop.
Yeah.
But we almost need to quantify that with what type of human we need.
Competent human.
It needs exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I'm gonna, as a teacher, create a worksheet with AI, I as the expert in that field, hopefully, I'm able to judge it and go, actually, that's not right, or let's change it. That's not going to help. And we talk about that kind of collaboration with an AI. My expertise with this AI intelligence can do some amazing things. And I suppose that doesn't change for vibe coding. But the problem is, I suppose, is when you get someone like me who's vibe coding something, and I don't have the expertise in coding, in security protocols that if you're an actual company, you need to know. And so you just reach that same problem that we've talked about for a few years now of passing something off as professional or as my own work, and actually not having the capability to check it and be the human in the loop. And so we're at that kind of same problem that AI is thrown up in many different areas, I suppose. It's just I suppose the risks are probably even higher with
the problem you've got, so when you're building a piece of software, you come up with your concept or your prototype of what it looks like, and you've got loads of tools that do it. Then you can set off an agent to start building the front end, back end database code. But then whether it's the EU AI Act, whether it's a GDPR, whether it's any data privacy law around the world, you then need currently, it's inferred in all of those pieces of regulation and laws, there's a human in the loop that understands what is being built, so then can review the code of that product to understand what is going on. Then that gets deployed through that gets tested at a functional level. But then you have a security tester that tests it to to qualify that actually there aren't any vulnerabilities or the vulnerabilities in there that can be managed before it gets deployed into production. What we're seeing with a lot of EdTech vendors who are integrating AI is that they don't have any of those checks. So they are going from like a replit into a full scale production, but not having the expertise along the way. And with as a school, when you are contracting with those parties, you are signing their terms and conditions. And first of all, you need to make sure that all the terms and conditions discharge your liability to that vendor. So you need to make sure that they say they do security testing, even if they don't. By signing a contract that saying that they do, you are discharging an element of your liability to that third party. But there is a next level down in terms of asking for the evidence of those third parties about how they how do they demonstrate what they are doing is in fact. And this sort of brings us onto in terms of the educators AI tools, right? So Dan has this great website. Dan, you tell us about it. What is it? What does it do? And what's the purpose of it?
It's AI educator.tools, so AI educator.tools. And for a while now, in fact we started this early 2023. Because we even found in those early months since the launch of ChatGPT and everyone was discovering AI, a lot of products just appeared. Now back then, products like School AI, Magic School, the ones that have kind of become kind of household names in terms of education, were brand new. They were just getting started. There was a lot of teachers and educators saying, "Where do I start? Which one should I use?" And so we put together, essentially it was a Google Sheet database with just a very, very thin front end on it so that people could filter and search and find tools that they might want to try. And we just kind of kept it like that for a few years, and really, really found the need over the last 18 months to develop it. So we were working, took us about 12 months to work on this, and really develop it into a community. So the idea is, I suppose it does have that functionality of you find a tool and there's an AI chatbot in there that can help you, or just categories and filter functionalities where you go, right, as an educator, this is what I'm trying to do. Is there a tool that'll help me? You find the tool, but then you go on to that tool and you can find lots of other educators reviewing it. So typical review kind of thing. But then also we have community forums that are linked to every tool, where there's a conversation going on around that tool from educators, sharing good practice, sharing things they've experienced. So the whole idea is that if you're a single teacher or a school and you're looking to go out and discover these tools, you can find a community of peers who are sharing real world experience about these tools. And then alongside that, the community offers not just discussions on tools, but discussions of different themes. There's a thread on vibe coding, there's a thread on security issues, there's a thread on assessment in AI. In fact, I think we've got over 200 different threads in there. We've got about, at the minute, I think we're just about to hit 3,000 educators in there who are in the conversation. And yeah, so we're kind of, speaking of ecosystems, trying to build a bit of an ecosystem where they can go there. There's also webinars, articles, and all those types of resources. But I suppose one of the missing links was the how do we know these tools are secure? And as anyone who listens to these webinars with us, and it was even just listening to the conversation of the last half hour, this is so complex. So even just, I know we were talking about this a few months ago, Mark, even just putting on there some kind of traffic light, this isn't good, this is okay, this is all safe, is really complex. I know you guys have this, you cover this on your platform as well, because it's just so nuanced, and it depends on region, and it depends on the risk appetite you have as an organization, all of that kind of thrown in there. So, and you don't want to leave yourself open to be saying this is safe and then it not being because they update it and you didn't realize, and suddenly you're bringing a lawsuit onto yourself. So now I'm talking about this, I'm like, why did we do this? So for us, it was really important that we didn't just do a half-assed job of this,
Yep.
and just and go on vibes almost. But actually, we worked with an organization who had a global reputation on this, who had the expertise, who were already doing this, and obviously that was you guys. It was Nine. So what we've done is we've where you guys have assessed the tool using your global expertise. We have put a badge on that tool now saying this has a security assessment that goes with it. And so now when a user discovers a tool, they see that badge, which is the same color green as your logo, which is behind you, Mark. They see that badge says security assessment. They click on it. It takes them over to your platform where they can create a guest account and start to analyze some of those security benefits and security assessments around data, around bias, ethics, around data, privacy, risks, all of that kind of thing. And then they can take that data and start using it in their DPIAs and start using it in their own internal assessment. And probably hand over to you now because that side of the thing is your expertise. So what once they click through and start to look at those assessments, what robust assessment information can they find?
So the way that we assess it is around what we call the diamond formation. That is very much what we'll hear from Nine over the coming 12 months, and that has academic at the top. So everything is focused towards being fit and purpose from an academic perspective, but it's supported in terms of the evaluation by privacy, cybersecurity, tech, and safeguarding when it comes to looking and evaluating AI within products. So every product that comes through the business gets evaluated by Julia's team, and there's a very in-depth and independent process of looking at that product, both from a teacher perspective, but also from a student perspective. And then from that becomes classification around here are the risks, here are the issues, and here are the tasks that you as a school need to be managing if you are going to use that product. So using your platform, first of all, makes people aware that there is an assessment available for that specific product. And quite rightly, schools can come through to the Nine platform, set up a guest account, and get access to the number of the assessments that they're looking for. I think it's a really, really great tool. Julia, with that, when we're talking about compliance and we're looking at vendors specifically, what I'm really interested to understand is how vendors are really adapting their contracts or their paper trail to accommodate the threats that we've been speaking about around AI. So schools can, is there a gauge to say that schools are now better protected now than they were 12 months ago contractually because EdTech vendors have evolved their terms and conditions to provide that protection?
Yeah, we haven't seen. So for anyone who hasn't been on these webinars before, me and my team carry out these vendor assessments a lot. We carry them out for our vendor library. We also carry them out for our clients. So in terms of what we're seeing, the contractual obligations that are usually there, that should be there in terms of data protection and privacy, will also apply to all of your AI. So they just become even more important. And it's even more crucial that we have those contractual obligations in place. Which is usually through like a data processing agreement, something like that. So they've just become more crucial. And then what we are seeing is not necessarily changes in contracts, but we're seeing transparency statements come through. So that's kind of most of the ways that the vendors are responding. And we're seeing some of the education specific AI vendors provide information that isn't just kind of, okay, we use AI responsibly, which might be like a broad kind of vague statement. We're seeing much more like, here are our modules that use AI. Here is our role under various regulations. This is what our risk category is. This is what you need to do as a school. And here's our sort of compliance roadmap to other regulations like the EU AI Act. I've seen some great examples of this, but they're still quite limited, I would say. So we might get some privacy information, we might get some safety information, but we're not getting that full transparency statement that I would love to see. That's like that full kind of gold standard. And I also see sometimes information is partly over here in a blog article, is partly over here in a help page, is partly over here in a statement, and we're not getting it all together in like a really clear way. So I feel like there's some improvement to come, particularly where tools are education specific. because that is going to be a requirement. We are going to need that as schools. But what I think is going to happen is we're going to see that ramp up now over the next few months, because we're going to see the EU AI Act, which I can never say properly, come into force fully in August. So everything that's not already in force comes in August, minus one small part. So what these transparency statements are going to be requirements now. So I think over the next couple of months, we're going to get a real speeding up of this. So even if you're not in the EU, which I know a lot of you won't be, but even if you're not in the EU, you'll see these transparency statements across their different vendors' websites, because they're going to have to do them. And one of the things that's really important about them is they have to be in clear language. So you shouldn't have to be a technical expert to understand them. So if you've ever looked at like model cards and test results and things, sometimes if you're not a technical expert, they can be really confusing. But one of the things that they need to do is make them clear for anyone who's not a technical expert. So that's what I think is gonna come through, and we're starting to see that happen now. That certainly your contractual agreements are even more important when AI is concerned, and we should be seeing these transparency statements. And if we're not, we need to ask for them.
David and Mary, I really appreciate the comments that you have there in chat. So David says, as I think about integrating AI into our work as real life educators, I can't help to think that it feels a bit like we're handing someone who's drowning a large heavy object to hold on to. I'm mostly concerned about the appropriate balance of integrating these helpful tools whilst ensuring essentially safety, etc., etc. Now, Dan, we've got a couple of things that we are announcing. The first one is called the Diamond Sprint, which has sort of academic and pedagogy at the top, but really it's around bringing together 10 schools in a sprint to sort of overcome this problem. Can you just explain a bit more about how you think the Diamond Sprint, which is held here in the 9 offices, and also we have one scheduled in Riyadh, how that can really help a school bring together the different their different roles within the Diamond to overcome the feeling of drowning and have some purpose about moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's a really nice way to look at this. And essentially in that diamond, looking at four main areas where AI kind of impacts a school environment and where action might need to be taken. And I think looking at David and Mary's comments, I think they're 100% right, in that actually we haven't really touched upon the pedagogy, the academic side. And I suppose part of this webinar is because there are so many resources out there that do focus on the teaching and learning side of things, and I produce many of them myself. And I suppose the purpose of this webinar is to maybe shed some light onto the security elements and the leadership around that as much as possible, because it doesn't really get talked about a lot elsewhere. But yeah, for balance, for yourself, David, and for you, Mary, to come back over to the academic side, which is a really important part of this. I think as somebody I am a teacher. I worked on senior leadership teams in high schools. The teaching and learning is so important. It's the bread and butter. It's what we should be getting right within schools, and what we do often get right. And we have a lot of science to back us up now as well. We're not talking about throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. Technology, like anything else within a school, like the building, like the classroom, like the personnel, is there to support our main business of is learning. It's learning. That's what we're about. That's what we're all about. So please, if you do, I know David said there, it's like throwing someone who's drowning a heavy object. If that's what it feels like, don't hand them the object, David. Please don't. Let's look at how we can do this strategically. And if at the moment you're thinking, I don't know how we do this, how do I just want to go to a teacher and go, right, here's an AI, use it, and pile on them some workload and cognitive overload, and without any proper behavioral training and all that goes with that, then we obviously need to do that a bit more strategically, because we don't want to get in the way of good teaching, good learning. So just to kind of put that out there out front, really. I suppose this conversation we're having is for a few steps down that line. Once we've decided actually this technology might help us, and actually we're starting to see some benefits, it's about all the implications that come with that then, and how to do this appropriately, and so on, and securely. But I would say, probably just to delve into that, because I said the word behavioral, which might seem a bit odd in that context, but I do think that that is key to using this. And I think if you think kind of how we probably traditionally integrated things into schools, and probably not done it so well. I mean, one of the classic examples is that interactive whiteboard. In many schools across the world, teachers just came in one morning and there was an interactive whiteboard. Nobody taught them how to properly use it. It was just there. And so it just became a projection screen, and
Mm.
nobody ever really used it. And you might have the one keynote teacher who's like, oh, I'm using my whiteboard to do this and this and this, but nobody else is really doing it. It's kind of, we didn't do that well. And you can pick up that model and apply it to how iPads were rolled out in some places, how laptops were rolled out in some places. Um, this is quite different, I think. I think AI technology isn't another technology like that. It's a technology that kind of underlies that, and you hear it kind of compared to electricity or the internet. And I think that's probably more of a realistic analogy, because actually it's not the product itself. It's something that underlies a lot of different things that we do, and AI is in our life all the time anyway now, and has been for a number of years. But I think it's a behavioral thing. I think it's a how do we use this, in a way that is already is integrated into the things that we're already doing. If you're a good teacher, how do you integrate it into good teaching? And if
Mhm.
that's feeling a bit murky at the minute, then we need to step back and figure that out before we introduce the tool on top of that.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And Dan Finesse, he's added in the point. He's a high mark. I'm interested to know what you think about student, where you think student voice fits into this diamond approach, especially as we look between the interaction between AI and safeguarding. Like from our perspective, the student voice is incredibly important, and I generally feel it fits within, first of all, the academic part of the diamond, but also from a understanding potential low level concerns around that the AI is creating, that sort of fits into the safeguarding and also the IT systems to make sure that you have the relevant things in place and the controls in place to service those concerns. But essentially, the academic side of the diamond needs to have the right structures in place. And in most schools, they already do have those structures in place. They have safeguarding systems. When I say systems, I'm not talking about IT systems. I'm talking about the management structures to surface concerns. Most schools have those, and they perpetuate from the academic side. And when it comes to student voice and AI, I think the academic part of the diamond has to really consider how they are going to ensure that student voice is considered at all steps of the journey. Dan, you do quite a bit of work with schools and how they do this. Now, what have you found out that works from a
Yeah, I
student voice
guess it's
perspective?
I guess it is important. I think it's a layer under that diamond, I think, in
Mm,
terms of what supports those four areas.
mm,
Is and it's how you organize your task force or your teams or whatever it is you're doing to support that in your school. And I suppose just like many schools do, like some schools do, if they're building a new building, actually bring in students for their input
mm,
on what the building should be like, because they're going to be the main users of it. And I suppose that might not naturally feel like a natural connection in your head, because you're thinking, well, that's not why the students are here. But actually, they their voice should be heard in all aspects of it. So yeah, I think probably going hand in hand with that is the education side of it. So
mm,
do you have AI literacy sessions within your school where you're teaching your students and helping them learn around where AI impacts data security? Are you and where it might impact, leadership decisions in the school, or just leadership decisions in the world? I mean, you could take that to a political level in all sorts of areas. So I actually think that diamond formation, I've never really properly thought about this, so I'm voicing this as I'm thinking it. actually is quite a good AI literacy framework as well
Yeah.
for the different areas that our students should be learning about, as well as our colleagues, and all of those voices together, as well as, I think, people outside of the school, our parents, our communities, our local business leaders, our local AI experts, if we have them, our higher educational experts. So I think we need to be bringing, and I wrote my book Infinite Education. The second half of that book is all about how do you bring together a task force to address this. And I really try to make the point clear that this shouldn't just be internal. It should be your students, your leaders, your staff, and your teachers, but it should also be the community, because this is something that impacts it's such a wide variety of areas in our lives.
Mm. Sorry, Julia.
No, I was just going to add that we did a session of our AI and Privacy Academy yesterday, which is a cohort of a number of schools, representatives from a number of schools, and we were talking about kind of this movement towards not grabbing AI tools because they're innovative, and not grabbing them because they're shiny and new, and doing this deeper work and thinking particularly about what value they add. So particularly when it comes to teaching and learning, like what's meaningful value are they adding? And we were talking about it in the context of all the governance stuff. So we were thinking about, okay, if you need to be monitoring it, if you are getting, if it has moderation in place, if it has filtering, if it's flagging up concerning conversations with students, who's watching that? So when we were talking about, when you take on a tool, it's not just about thinking about what the vendor's doing, it's also thinking about what you're going to do and how you're going to implement all these things at the school. So you're really starting to think kind of a more mature approach is exactly what you're saying, thinking about who needs to weigh in on this. Not your strategy rather than individual tools, of course, but who needs to weigh in on this, but also what's the benefit versus the risk, and is it genuine? Is there genuine benefit there versus the risk? And that's probably where you would get this slightly more specific decision on vendor tools, and saying, okay, we're probably just going to use Gemini then, rather than like go off and implement 6 or 7 across the school at different grades or different subject levels and things like that. So that's slightly, I think that's more where we're moving to certainly now, is that slightly more mature thinking of really considering that academic benefit, and making sure that it's strong. You can strongly justify the risks that come with using these tools as well.
There are 2 resources there in the chat. We have the blog about more information around the diamond formation, about the diamond formation, and secondly around the diamond sprint, which is a professional development day that Dan and I are hosting. Essentially, we in a day we break down what your strategy is, the direction of your strategy, the boundaries of your policy, bring together that diamond formation to agree your academic plan, not just at a high level, but at a very task-driven, what we could deliver. So read more information there. Dan, I was really interested to see, you were talking about community and in community engagement, and recently at St. Julian's in Portugal, we were working together. You were working with Katie. Katie was doing the governance framing around how to responsibly and ethically integrate AI into the school, and you did a lot of work with teachers, parents, including and the board. And one of the statements that you came back with was around, one of the first schools that you've seen really that is really pressing ahead in a responsible and proactive way in integrating AI, what I put in a digital integration project type way. Can you just sort of give us a bit more of an overview about what you experienced or the support that you were providing to that school?
Yeah, it was a great day. So yeah, like you say, we did a session with parents first thing, then we did senior leadership team, then we did teachers, and then we did 3 hours with the governors after school. So it was an intense day, but it was brilliant. It was, and you know what, it was great to see, because I think St. Julian's are a school that are really purposefully already heading down the road. And they have, and I suppose a bit like what you were just saying, Julia, they've just went, right, no, we're gonna go with Gemini. They're a Google school, so they've got, right, we're gonna go with Gemini, and we're gonna get the benefits of this tool, because not only do we know that these are pretty good tools, but also we know that we can be guaranteed certain safety elements around this and risk protection. So they've headed in that direction. And if you think, like, going back to that word behavior, um, behavior is not necessarily down to a tool. It's about how you use the technology, like we say, to fit in with what you're doing, and to think about it in the processes that you normally think about. And I think sometimes just another tool can be another distraction from that. Because, and I know, like I'm the same. Like you get this shiny tool, and you're like, wow, look what it can do. I was sat in that auditorium in Mountain View last week, just being thrown
Downloading all the new tools.
shiny, yeah, shiny toy after shiny toy, and I'm like, what can we do with this? And immediately, and I think you can't afford yourself to be in this headspace every now and then, but being in that headspace is going, how can I use that?
Mhm.
And so you're justifying why you might want to use that tool. When actually, when it comes to the day-to-day workings of your job, if you're a teacher in a school or a leader in a school, it's not necessarily going, well, how can I tag that new shiny thing onto what we're already doing and add more complexity? It's going, actually, how do we make things more simple? How do we stick to what our purpose is, what our main mission is? Going back to what David and Mary were saying earlier, how do we stick to our goal of delivering good teaching and learning and helping our kids be successful? Go the opposite way, simplify it, and think which technology can support that overall goal. And so you do find a lot of schools like St. Julian's going, right, you know what, we're just finding Gemini, or it might be Copilot if you're in Microsoft, or it might be Canva, and a lot of schools are using Canva in a similar way because it's kind of got its own ecosystem in there now to go, right, we're just going to stick to this. It can kind of do a lot of the main things a lot of these technologies can do already, and how do we just use this to the best of our ability to support what we're doing. And I was really struck at St. Julian's by how that's what they're doing. That's what their main goal is. And I think how I suppose I might have helped them over the day is to go, right, how do we now, it's the people side of it, really. How do we integrate it? Because we're finding, and a lot of evidence out there, one of them being the new Microsoft Work Trend Index from that was released in March, I think it was, um, that kind of surveyed 20,000 employees from around the world, lots of different organizations that were adopting AI. They found that even the organizations that were heavily adopting AI, they all got stuck around a 19% adoption rate. And so
Mhm.
those 19% were doing some amazing things with AI, doing things they could never do before. But the other 81% in these organizations, and I'm finding this reflective in schools, to be fair, as well, were stuck. And it wasn't for want of lack of inspiration on how to use these tools. It wasn't for want of an extra webinar. It wasn't for want of an extra training session. There was a disconnect there. And I think it goes back to how we view this technology. And it's interesting. I saw something online recently where, and it was somebody who was trying to make the point that AI is not very good. And they said, um, when what was it when printers were first introduced to schools, you didn't need to convince people to use them. The clear use case was there. Okay,
Yeah.
I now use the printer because this is like, you didn't have to go, please use it. Let's do a whole integration strategy for the printer. Like it was, and so they were making this whole point of, well, that's what good technology is, and the fact that we're trying to squeeze AI into what we're doing means that AI probably isn't very good. Now I get the point that was being made there, but I think it's the wrong take. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the technology, because to say, like we've said, it's like a printer, like a whiteboard, like a laptop, misses the point. I think it's a different type of technology, and it's more technology that actually needs to be integrated into our behavioral patterns, and that gets complex. It comes down to change management. It comes down to leadership, making expectations, not just encouragement, but expectations, and helping people to really integrate this into their behaviors of what first of all what they're already doing. And what this survey found, just to finish on this point, was that that actually that's where that 19% started of
Yeah.
going like, well, actually, I'm going to try and it go, like I sometimes do it to myself where I go, right, actually, I need to think more about how I could do this with AI, and maybe I can get some benefits from there. So I'm doing what I'm normally doing. I'm going, actually, how could AI help with this? And they found that 19% do that really well. And a year later in the survey, they found that most of those 19% were then doing things they could never have done a year earlier. And I think that's when we start to see the benefits of this. That's when technology truly becomes transformational, when you can do things that you could
Yeah.
never have done before without it. But you've got to get there first. 19% take care of themselves, they'll get there no matter what you're doing. The 81% need more structural support, they need more organizational support and expectations. And I that's what we looked at St. Julian's. How do we go from? And I think that's where a lot of schools are at the minute, especially those schools that ran early with this. They've been doing it a year, they've been doing it 3 years. They got out ahead because they want to be the innovational schools. A lot of them now are stuck at that 19-20% mark and are thinking, what do we do now? And I think this is almost like the next step. I think we've in a lot of cases misjudged this technology, and we need to think about it, about how it can really integrate and help us do what we want.
Sounds like tablets, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and look at what's happening now, where there's a massive backlash against them, massive
Yeah.
backlash, because we haven't and when we get these black and white arguments of technology's bad, technology's good, tablets are good, tablets are bad, and leading to literally in the United States bans in some states for this technology. Like, I think we really really need to step back and think, actually, is the technology bad, or is it we just haven't fully integrated it, we haven't fully
Yeah.
figured out how to use this to support us yet, and then therefore every kid gets an iPad, and because we're not using them that well, the kid just downloads their own apps onto it, uses it as a personal device, and it doesn't get used all that well.
So here's one thing to consider. So us as a business, we're using a couple of use cases for AI. Using Claude, we've created a whole rules engine for our marketing. Coming in the near future, you'll start seeing some. You'll see some emails this week, right? So the email that you get today, if you're watching this, the Diamond Sprint comes from how the rules engine that we've created. So we created a rules engine. A whole range of different rules have gone into that around the context of the business, our business plan, or there's other sorts of stuff. And then we've got a whole range of different agents that have then come up with this stuff, and it's really really valuable. But as a person who's responsible for marketing, the people responsible for marketing in the business, their role is evolving to become quality assurance of the marketing product. The coding team won't be spending all the time coding all the time, but they have built their own rules engine using like Codex or Claude. So we're building it from the raw level up, right? From like you have all these EdTech products that are the polished version that try to meet a school's needs. And we spoke about earlier about people, building their own things in schools. As a business, we wouldn't go out and buy a product off the shelf. We'd build it ourselves using the Riz rules engine. So this is a last thing for everyone to sort of dwell to think about. And I will ask your comment, Dan, and your comment, Julie, before we wrap up. In 12 months' time, do we think we'll be sitting here and most schools will be going, well, we're stuck at the 19%, therefore we built our own Claude account, we put our own rules engines in, and we solved our own problems rather than relying on other people? And yes, we had to, Julia, we sort of recognize we have to evaluate ourselves, but we've accepted that. Do you think that's realistic, or do you think we're going to continue to see EdTech products evolve into the needs of schools rather than schools evolve into their own EdTech needs?
I don't mind going first,
Yeah.
but I think I'm going to choose the easy option here. I think it's going to be both. I think we're going to. I Again, just like we've been saying, we get these black and white arguments, and you hit, like 2 months ago, everyone on social media was saying this is the end of software. It's the end of SaaS. It's the end. It's clearly not, because like the average person at home isn't sat at home thinking I'll just write my own app. And I don't think they're ever fully going to be in that position, because why would you when you can pay 99p and download the app? And like I think so. I think we'll see software getting better, maybe more personalized, hopefully. But I think it will kind of open up a side of things where we get used to creating solutions for ourselves. Now, we're always like, go back to Google I/O. What they're doing with search over in the coming months is going to be really interesting, because if they do carry on down this path, your Google search literally will create apps for you within Google search now. So you'll say, right, how, I think one of their examples was, how does a black hole work? Quite a popular search term within Google. So instead of pulling up links or an AI overview, it will literally create a 3D app that will let you toggle the different variants on a black hole, and it will recreate it in a like literally within about 30 seconds. So are we going to see more of that? I think we will. Are we going to see people creating their own little apps? I think we will. It's like before, when we talked about the dangers of vibe coding, I think one of the great benefits is just what you can create for yourself. Like, so don't be sticking everyone else's data in a enterprise level app. But if you can create your own little fitness coach, or if you can create your, like, I've got a friend who he travels a lot for work, and so he just hooked it up with a hotel and a flight API, and now whenever he needs to be somewhere, he just says, I need to be in this city for 2 nights on these dates, and it pulls back the cheapest flights, the best hotel based on his preferences. No data's going in there, nothing that's going to be a security risk, but it's a nice little solution for him. So I think if we can get to that point, I think we'll just see a new arm of what software can be, because these apps are still going to have to be within a bigger software ecosystem.
Yeah,
it's just that software will enable us to personalize and create a bit more than we have, I think. Now, I could be completely wrong there, and there are some people who think literally it's the end of the internet and it's the end of apps, and actually, I just heard yesterday OpenAI are creating their own mobile phone at the moment, and which should be out late 27, which if the rumors are correct, they're building it on this idea of a future where the phone will have no apps. It'll be just being like an AI agent. So I could be completely wrong there. Obviously, it just depends on whether we want it. It depends on the market. That's probably one of the good things about being in a capitalist society, is that if it works well, the majority choose what they want, and things that aren't wanted disappear.
Cool. And Julia?
Yeah, I would agree. I'm thinking about kind of the expertise that we've seen that schools have, because where we have seen this kind of coming through, it's been, one very, very enthusiastic person, sometimes in the IT department, not always. So, I think if you don't have that very enthusiastic person, and they don't have necessarily the resource or the time, then it's probably not going to happen. I don't think that schools are going to necessarily start kind of portioning off periods of time and portioning off resource to go and create their own services and their own platforms and their own apps. So I think it's a bit kind of uneven kind of spread of that happening at the moment, depending on who's in the school and what enthusiasm they have, what competency they have, and how big the problem is for their school as well. So I think it depends. We have these vendors are moving. The vendors that provide to schools, especially the big ones, are moving very, very fast at the moment. So I think it also depends on how quickly they can adapt to what schools need at the moment, and fill that, kind of solve that build first buy question for their own purposes, so that schools are more likely to go buy rather than build. So I think it's going to be a very variable pattern for a little while.
Fantastic. Well, in wrapping up the playbook for today, thank you very much, Julia. Thank you very much, Dan. I really appreciate your contributions. Hope for everyone who's watched today's episode and either live or on demand has enjoyed it. If you need any more information about what we've spoken about, then please reach out to anyone from the 9 team or ping down an email. You can find his details on the AIeducator.tools and his own website. If you've broken up for the summer, then hopefully you're going to go and enjoy the break. And for those of you who are still at school for the next few weeks, really hope it's an easy transition into the summer break. So wish you all well and see you in the new academic year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.